Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing some of the big decisions with regards to team selection that Mikel Arteta will have to make over the coming weeks. Yes, he's got plenty of difficult decisions, I think, to be mulling over, to be considering. I know he always talks about kind of unplugging a little bit and having a bit of a breather during the international break. But I'm sure he'll be sitting there with his morning coffee thinking about who replaces Martin Odegaard, who we know now is going to be out until mid-November. He'll be thinking about who plays on that left-hand side. He'll be thinking about, I think, repurposing Gabriel Martinelli. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to consider. And obviously, the fact that we're in this position is a good thing. The fact that we have options is a good thing. But obviously, with the options comes difficult decisions. And this is where I think it's kind of going to be key this season. I think if Mikel Arteta gets the vast majority of these decisions right, and he's not going to get them all right, there isn't a manager on the planet that gets every single decision right. But if he gets the vast majority of these decisions right, and he utilizes the squad in the way that it can be close to its maximum, then we've got a great chance of having a really, really successful season. I mean, to put it into context, we're sitting here bemoaning the fact that Martin Odegaard's out, who is a big player for us, is an important player for us. Him being out is undoubtedly a blow. But at the same time, you're sitting there and you're going, well, Eze can play there, or Nwaneri can play there. And all of a sudden, things feel a lot better, don't they? So we're going to get into that attacking midfield 8/10 position. We're going to talk about what Mikel does on the left going forward. And we're going to talk about the potential repurposing of Gabriel Martinelli as well. So there's a lot to get into on today's pod. You might be thinking, why is he ignoring Mikel Merino, who scored another couple of goals for Spain last night in their qualifier, who I think has got 6 goals in his last 4 qualifiers or something like that. He's just been in inspired form and he's turned into one heck of a goal scorer. We're not ignoring Mikel Merino. We're going to bring you a bonus bit of content, which will be out later today. And it's titled The Curious Case of Mikel Merino. So there's a Mikel Merino bonus pod coming out later today. So that's why we're not talking about him in the main pod so much. So yeah, I'm not ignoring what he managed to do last night. Again, I was blown away. Again, I was very, very impressed by it. Look, before we dive into the bulk of today's content, if you are with us on YouTube, don't forget to leave a like on the video. If you're a regular, you'll know what you're going to get by now. Subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening to us on Apple or on Spotify, then please do leave us a review, because those really, really do help. If you'd like to go one further, you can become a patron by visiting patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. A massive thank you to those of you that have signed up in the last few days, and to those of you who continue to support the podcast as we build and as we grow. For just £3 a month, you'll get access to exclusive content after every single game. Plus, you get every episode of the podcast completely ad-free, which I know to a lot of people is a big deal. All for less than the price of a cup of coffee in London. And of course, you become a part of our community. You can get involved in our chats and you can reach me directly if you wish to. Right, let's say a few hellos, shall we, as well, because there's plenty of you with us this morning, which is a sign, right, that the international break is coming to an end. It's always a little bit slower during the international break. I completely appreciate that there's less interest in any Arsenal-related content, because quite frankly, a lot of the time during the international break, we're scraping the barrel. That's why I tried this time around to think of different ideas, to do different formats, unpopular opinions. Would you rather? I tried to think a little bit outside the box. Whether it was a success or not, I don't know. That's down to you guys. But yeah, try to just do something ever so slightly different. We've got Junior, we've got James, we've got Candyman, Zach, Steve, Just Saying, James, we've got Juan, We've got Wandering Minstrel. We've got Bode, Don Arsenal TV. Jid is with us. Dave's joining us from Melbourne, Australia. Just mentioning that Eberechi Eze scored last night as well. He did indeed for England. And what I really liked about that goal, by the way, was that he picked it up in that left half space, which is where, he would have the license to kind of drift into if he's playing as the 10, but also that's the type of area and type of space I'd like to see him attacking if he's playing from that left flank as well. So that goal gave me encouragement about his ability to play in both of those positions. Lots of comments about the beard. Juan says the beard is growing incredibly quickly. I told you it would. It was a real shock to the system, I think, for a lot of people to see me clean shave it, but we are back. We are back. That didn't last long, did it? Okay, let's get into Eberechi Eze first, because I think that 10 position is really, really important. And I call it a 10 position now because in the past, you'd have seen Arsenal play with a kind of a 6 in Thomas Partey and then 2 8s in Rice and Odegaard. And I think in order to play that way, you need to have the right profiles. It needs to click, right? And it did work because we had Odegaard and Rice, who are both very good players going both ways. And then you had Thomas Partey kind of sitting as that lone 6 figure. Since Martin Zubimendi's arrived, and I've said this before, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, I always felt it was important that we changed that shape and just adjusted that shape a little bit in the middle of the park. I wanted Declan Rice to drop a little bit deeper or to be a bit more of a box-to-box kind of guy rather than always holding that really high starting position. We've seen him do that. So it looks more like, to me now, especially in those away games, especially against the better opponents, it looks to me more like now we've got a kind of double pivot and we give a little bit more license to whoever the 10 is or the third midfielder is. When it's Odegaard, it can be a little bit more flexible and it can be a bit more rotational in that Odegaard can drop into the 6 and get on the ball. He can rotate as an 8 if you want to push Declan Rice on, or if it's Mikel Merino playing, whoever it might be. But with Eberechi Eze, I don't think it can be as rotational. And so I think it's more important that we have the double pivot out of possession. But obviously, that also platforms Eze to get higher up the pitch, to be closer to the striker, to go left and right, searching and combine with the wide players without it damaging our structure. And obviously, we know that that's where he does his best work. When he played there against Newcastle, I thought he was outstanding. I love his willingness to take shots on. I love his willingness to try the difficult things, to produce the unpredictable. There's a lot going for Eberechi Eze, and I'm really, really excited about him. And actually, although I'm not happy that Martin Odegaard's injured, I think getting to see Eze now for a run of games in what is, in my view, his best and preferred position, I think, it's going to be exciting. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how he fares in those games and how he does. So, yeah, look, I think it's people will say it's a no-brainer to throw Eze in because we obviously paid a lot of money for him. He was a player that was very, very high up Arsenal's wish list. But there is Ethan Nwaneri as well. And I feel like, you could make the case that at the start of this season, Ethan Nwaneri's been a bit unlucky. You can make the same case for Miles Lewis-Skelly as well. 2 players who undoubtedly enjoyed breakout seasons last time, who would have come into this season expecting to play much bigger and much more significant roles in the team, but who, due to the added depth and due to some of the summer recruitment, have found themselves just falling ever so slightly down the pecking order. Like ordinarily, it would have been Odegaard out, Eze in. Odegaard out, Nwaneri in is what I should have said. But then you get Eze in, and Eze's in the picture. Now, Eze, people could argue, would play on the left as well. I don't think that there is that same willingness from Mikel Arteta to do that as there is from a lot of the fans. Like for me, when Odegaard's fit, for instance, I want to see Odegaard playing and I want to see Eze playing from the left. That's what I would do because I think it's beneficial to get both of those guys in the team. But if you look at what we've done in recent weeks, we've got Gabriel Martinelli coming off the bench and impacting games and doing brilliantly. You've got Leandro Trossard, I think, enjoying a little bit of a kind of renaissance, if you like, in terms of getting himself back on track and being able to impact and influence games. And if you don't use any of those 2, you can put Eze out there. So again, the depth is a real big thing and something that we should be sort of talking about and focusing on. And as I keep saying, it kind of removes the excuse, doesn't it? Even when you lose players like Martin Odegaard, having this level of depth is important. But you got to find the right balance. And I've talked about it when I've been discussing the midfield. It's a kind of horses for courses type approach, I think, that Arsenal need to take this year if they're going to achieve what we want them to and what we know they're capable of, by the way. So, yeah, I mean, Eze would be the one for me that starts in that 10 position now, moving forward. But I also feel a little bit bad for Ethan Nwaneri. I mean, he wasn't even in the squad up at Newcastle, and we talked about that before. That was a consequence of us just having way more depth. It's not a slight on the player, but what I don't want players like Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly, who would have been on cloud 9 last season because of the way they broke through, sort of starting to question themselves and doubt themselves and their confidence dropping off. So I think even though Eze's going to be the guy, right, that starts these games, I'm pretty confident in saying that. I think it's really, really important that Nwaneri is involved. And that can be him coming on with 30 minutes to go in certain games. Like some of the games, start him. Start him. I've got no problem. You're never going to get me picking up a team sheet before a game, seeing Ethan Nwaneri's name on there and going, don't like that. Now, I've got my preference, and I think that Eze all round will give us a little bit more in that 10 position. But in those games in particular, when you're playing with a low block against a low block and there is no space in behind for a Gabriel Martinelli to go and hurt the opposition, then play them both. Play Nwaneri on the edge of the box, have him receiving, turning, spinning, shooting, and have Eze coming in off the left-hand side. If you haven't got room in behind, do you need to really prioritize the pace, for example, of Gabriel Martinelli? So I think there's a lot to consider here. There's a lot to think about. Obviously, you want to protect players from playing too many minutes, not just because they run the risk of picking up injuries, but I also think we've seen examples of where a player who, and it's very rare in this team, by the way, that we don't have depth to cover someone, but centre forward is that position right now, right? Where we're looking at it and we're going, Victor Gyökeres is the guy. If Kai Havertz was available, they could have shared that role a little bit more. And some would argue that actually it's been beneficial to Victor Gyökeres having Havertz out because it means that he's been able to play without there really being any pressure on him, to kind of hold that starting place and all the rest of it. But I just think to myself, actually, if you were able to make that change, give Victor Gyökeres a breather here and there, take him out of the firing line, take him out of the equation, take him off with 20, 30 minutes to go in a couple of those games, then you wouldn't see the drop-off that we saw a little bit against West Ham, where he just didn't feel as involved in the game. Now, granted, we were playing a low block, okay? And we were playing a Nuno low block. And we know how notoriously difficult and stubborn Nuno Espirito Santo's sides can be. I mean, he got Nottingham Forest into Europe, for God's sake. Nottingham Forest, by the way, who are properly toying with relegation at the start of this season. And if they don't change their manager, they could find themselves in real hot water. So, you have to take that into consideration. But I think we saw Victor Gyökeres suffering from having played essentially 3 games in 7 days. Not something he'll be used to. He'll be used to playing regularly, obviously. He's played in the Championship in the past. He's played out in Portugal. But to this level, to this intensity, I don't think he's done it. And, for that reason, it's going to take some time. And I think we've seen a little bit of a dip in his performance against West Ham, because he played really well at Newcastle the weekend before, had a midweek game against Olympiacos, again, where I thought he performed quite well. Yeah, I think for me, having the option in that centre-forward position will just give him a little bit more sort of rest and recovery time, and that might see us get a better version of Victor Gyökeres. But also that same principle, and where I was going with this, it applies for Eze, right? Yes, people will sit there now and they'll say, Eze the 10. That's what he should be in the absence of Martin Odegaard. But that doesn't mean he has to play every single minute of every single game. And why should he when we've got players of the quality of Ethan Nwaneri waiting in the wings? So this is where I talk about the need to utilize the squad correctly. Now, what I think is correct will be different to what you think is correct, and it might be completely different to what Mikel Arteta thinks is correct. It's a game of opinions, but ultimately, we're going to judge what's correct and what's incorrect on whether Arsenal get results, on Arsenal's performances, etc., etc. At this stage in the season, I got to be honest, like a lot of people are focused on performance. Like we beat Olympiacos, and sort of I was talking to some friends of mine after the game, and they were going, yeah, but you know what, it was only 2. I was like, who cares? You know, we just went to Newcastle the weekend before. We played a grueling match. We battled, fought. We were at one stage down and out, and we managed to turn the game around and go and win it. Right? That was an incredible result. The performance was really, really good. But then we played against Olympiacos, and maybe the performance wasn't as good, but guess what? We got the same outcome, 3 points. Why does it really matter? Like, I'm all for analyzing performances. I mean, we wouldn't have a podcast if we didn't. But at the same time, if you're getting the result while not always having to go up as far as 4th, 5th gear, that's an encouraging sign as well. You don't want that to continue forever, but there will be periods in the season where you need to kind of go into sort of safety mode, and you need to cruise through at sort of like 20 miles per hour rather than really kind of hitting that accelerator and going full throttle throughout, because that's just not sustainable. It's not something you can maintain, even with the depth and even with the quality that we have. There's just too much football these days, and we've talked about that time and time again. So for me, Eza will be the go-to guy, but I want to see Ethan Nwaneri involved, because I think Ethan Nwaneri is capable of impacting games, and also I'd be wary of managing him right as a guy and as a person, in that we've just convinced this kid to put pen to paper to a deal very recently. He's got a bright future. We don't want to lose him. We don't want to have his head turned. We don't want him to start thinking there isn't a place for me here at Arsenal. He has to be involved. If he's smart enough, which I'm sure he is, and if he's got the right people around him and he's having that constant communication with the manager, he'll understand that it's not to do with his performance levels. And it's just that Arsenal have had to level up the squad. And so there will be players that play less. And it's the same for people like Kai Havertz. Like, Kai Havertz probably isn't going to play as many minutes as he would have done previously now that Victor Gyökeres is here. But Kai Havertz has been one of Arteta's favourite players, clearly, over the last couple of seasons. So sometimes it's nothing to do with you, but you need that reassurance. And for these young lads, on the one hand, you're looking at it and you're going, they're young, you know, and I include Lewis Skelly in this as well. And you can even include Max Dowman in this too. I look at them and I go, they're young. They shouldn't be in a rush. They shouldn't be worried necessarily about having slightly reduced game time at this stage in their careers. But as a young man, actually, sometimes that's harder to process. Like, I think about some of the things that I've dealt with in life, just generally, in the last few years. And I think to myself, if I was 18, you know, it wouldn't have been as easy for me to process or deal with whatever it was I was dealing with. And I'm not saying it was anything dramatically bad, but I just think the older you get, the more mature you are, the more life experience you have, you know, the more equipped you are to deal with disappointments, setbacks, etc., etc. And, you know, sometimes as a footballer, I can imagine that, you know, you're looking at it and you're looking at the average length of a footballer's career, and you're in a bit of a panic. You're like, well, I have to achieve this, because by the time I'm 32, 33 years old, I might be on the way down, you know? So there's probably that kind of impatience as well that creeps into the whole psyche and mindset around that stuff. But anyway, let's see how that goes. But Eze for me will be the go-to 10, and Nwaneri will be the guy I think to support and to provide a slightly different option. On the left-hand side, if we're saying that we're going to use Eze through the middle, then is it going to continue to be shared, that role, by Trossard and Martinelli? I think that's probably the way that Mikel's going to go. And look, for whatever reason, he seems to really kind of fancy Trossard right now. And Trossard scored again the other day for Belgium. So he's in very, very good form at the start of this season. I said it a little bit earlier on. It feels like he's got a new lease of life, a new purpose. And I'm quite enjoying watching him this season. I think, again, when I talk about horses for courses, I think that left-hand side is the prime example of where that particular approach is going to serve us well. Because in a game away from home against a side that are going to come onto you a little bit, and there's space in behind to stretch and to hit Martinelli all day long. But when you're facing a low block, someone like Trossard, who's got that little bit more guile, that little bit more, with all due respect, football IQ, that ability to kind of cut inside and clip in a ball from the corner of the penalty box in towards that far post area, all of those things will be beneficial to us. So, yeah, I think those two to share that role is absolutely fine. But what I was thinking about the other day, and this is interesting because I sort of read a couple of posts on social media and sort of saw a few X posts. They're not called tweets anymore, whatever they're called anyway. Sort of saying that Gabriel Martinelli had played as a centre forward for Brazil in their friendly against Japan yesterday. Now, I watched Gabriel Martinelli's goal, and he doesn't score it necessarily from a centre forward. Well, you could argue it's a centre forward's position, but it feels like the type of position that Gabriel Martinelli likes to drift into from a slightly wider area. And if you watch the move a little bit earlier, he is in a sort of half space type position before he drifts inside and then he pulls back out wide to receive the ball and score. Confidence is massive in football, and we are seeing the benefit right now of Gabriel Martinelli playing with a renewed confidence. But when I looked through some of the statistical websites a little bit later on in the day, it looked like Vinicius Jr. was actually the one that played at centre forward. But the Martinelli centre forward conversation, it's been there for a long time. It goes back for me to when he first joined Arsenal Football Club. I remember sitting there saying, this kid is not a left winger, he's a striker. But at the same time, if you play him as that central figure, I do think in games like the one we played against West Ham last time out, he will get lost a little bit. I think he needs to have the freedom to time those runs in a way whereby he's harder to pick up. And the only way that he gets that or is able to sort of pull that off effectively is if he's starting from wider positions and he's drifting infield. So, yeah, I think the whole Martinelli played centre forward for Brazil thing has been overblown a little bit and overhyped, because if you look at some of the main statistical websites, it doesn't look like he was playing there despite what the team was written out like on paper. But in terms of running in behind, in terms of all of that, in terms of trying to capitalize on a game being stretched or trying to capitalize on a team that has finally stepped out to try and attack us a little bit, maybe because they're already losing the game, I think Martinelli at centre forward, in the absence of Havertz and in the absence of Jesus, should be considered. If anything, because he's shown himself to be able to make effective runs through the middle now. And with Arsenal's new approach of playing those balls forward earlier and hitting those spaces earlier, I think he's really benefiting from that and it's working for him. But also because it takes some of the burden away from Victor Gyökeres. And again, a bit like the Eze and Nwaneri point, I'm not saying that Gyökeres should be replaced as Arsenal's centre forward for the time being and that Gabriel Martinelli should be given that role indefinitely or anything like that. What I'm saying is if Gabriel Martinelli can just take 20 minutes off of Victor Gyökeres at the end of games where the state allows us to do that, then, we can protect him a little bit as well. And so having this big squad is great, and having multiple options is great, and applying the whole horses for courses approach, brilliant. But also, you got to protect players. Now, it's not even about saying to these players, right, you're going to miss this entire game. They can be involved in games, but you can manage their workloads using the alternative options that we have. Yeah, you can manage their workloads because we have got players now that can come in for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes. And interestingly, within our squad, I think we've got a group of players that are absolutely fine with coming into a game and just picking up where the others left off. There are some people that it just doesn't suit to be a substitute and they find it difficult. We've seen that many times over the years. But Martinelli's shown that he can come off the bench and impact. Trossard's shown many, many times throughout his Arsenal career that he can do the same. Mikel Merino is another one. And for those of you, again, wondering why we're not including Mikel Merino so much in this discussion, although he is an option as a potential 8/10, he's an option as a slightly deeper midfielder. He's an option as an auxiliary centre forward to take some of the responsibility again away from Gyökeres. So even without Havertz and Jesus, you could put Martinelli there and you could put Merino there. We're bringing you a bonus episode of the pod, which will be later out today, on Mikel Merino after his heroics for Spain again last night. So that's why we're not going into Mikel Merino in a lot of detail. But yeah, I just think, we can go around in circles all day about options, who can play where, who belongs at centre forward, who belongs on the left-hand side, who's the right option for X game versus Y game. And that is in itself the beauty of the state our squad finds itself in right now. So there's a lot to be excited about. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on, how we deal with the Odegaard absence. And although it's a blow, and I will have no one say it isn't, because it absolutely is. To not have Martin Odegaard is a blow, but it's not a fatal one. And it's not one, I don't think, that has the potential to derail our season in the way that it did in previous years, because we now have the capabilities to kind of fill those roles with good players. And listen, you could argue whether Odegaard's fit or not. You could make the case, and I would not shut you down, that says, do you know what? On current form, Eze should play over Odegaard anyway, because Odegaard's not really been as effective in recent months. And this goes back to last season, as he has been in the past. So actually, if you've got this depth and you've got this quality within your ranks, why not just put Eze in anyway? Do you see what I mean? So, yeah, it's a great place to be. Right, look, we're going to take a really short pause. When we come back, we're going to take some of your questions from the live chat to round up today's show. Thank you so much for being here. Short pause, and we'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe if you're with us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. Those reviews are like gold dust. We've got loads on Spotify. Let's try and get that up to the 1,000 mark. We're not a million miles away from that. And looking at some of the numbers and stats around the pod over the last few days, when I've had a bit more time due to the international break, I've seen we've had some incredible growth on Spotify. So thank you so much for your support and your love. On Apple, remember, we lost a load of reviews when we moved from one platform to another. Don't know how that happened. But if you are listening right now and you have left us a review in the past, try again, because it might be that yours is one of those that disappeared, and we'd love to have it. It helps people find the pod. It helps people gauge whether it's worth listening to or not. Some of you might say it's not, but you know what I mean. And also, if you want to go one further, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. What do you get for being a patron? You get exclusive content, bonus content after every single match, video content most of the time. And if there's not that much video to kind of analyze, or there isn't anything that really kind of throws up too many talking points, in that sense, we tend to focus on a player or on a particular phase in the game or whatever. Also, you get every single episode of the pod completely ad-free, which I know for a lot of people is a really important thing and a big deal. And of course, you become a part of our community. You get in touch with other patrons in the chat. We talk amongst ourselves, and you've got a direct line into me if there's anything you want to hear discussed on the pod, or if you just want to have a chat about the Arsenal. I'm always happy to do so. So get involved. Patreon.com/Chronicles of a Gooner. The link's in the description below, but if you're watching on YouTube, there's a QR code in the top corner of your screen. Am I pointing at it? Yeah, just about. You can scan that, and that will take you straight to the landing page. Right, let's get some of your questions from the live chat. I'd love to hear from you. What have we got? Guitar solo. I think he's talking about Odegaard here. Yep, he says it is a big blow, H. I agree, it's a blow that we've lost Odegaard for sure. You saw how these replacements you talk about couldn't unlock Newcastle, and Arteta was forced to bring on a not fully fit Martin who changed the game. You underrate his impact. No, I've been one of Martin Odegaard's biggest defenders. When people have sat there and said, you know, this guy's not doing anything in the final third anymore, I've always wanted to focus on what he brings off the ball, because I think Martin Odegaard, as a rounded footballer, is so good and so important to this team. I called him earlier in the pod, a two-way player, because he can impact the game going forwards, but he can also help you a hell of a lot defensively. He's got a lot going for him, Martin Odegaard. He's an important part of this machine. He's a key cog in this machine. And I would never sit here and say it's good that he's out. But if you wanted to make the case that right now he's not impacting games in the way that we know he can, that over the last few months he hasn't impacted games in the way that we know he can, and actually you'd like to see Eberechi Eze start anyway, that's a conversation I'm willing to entertain. That's all I've said. And I don't think that's wrong or unfair. And if we're talking about having depth, one of the big benefits of that is the competition that it breeds. And if you don't have competition, then what's the point in having depth just for the sake of saying you've got depth? If there's a massive drop-off between your players, that isn't a good thing. Now, there are some players that are so good that there will be drop-off, i.e. Bukayo Saka, right? You lose Bukayo Saka, Noni Madueke can be a really good option and do a really good job, but he's not Bukayo Saka because his level is up here. So you will get drop-offs in some spaces and in some places. I'm just saying that right now, I don't think the drop-off is that big. I think Eze's got the potential and the capability to do a lot for us. I really, really do. What else have we got in the chat box? Juan says, how much is the constant change in midfield and even the wings affecting the adaptation of Gyökeres? I feel personally, though, he's adapting very well. Yeah, I think all things considered, he's adapted relatively well. I don't think it's been amazing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's been amazing, but also I'm certainly not getting on the guy's back. And I understand that he's had to deal with a lot of change. You know, if you think about the left wing, sometimes it's Martinelli, sometimes it's Trossard, sometimes it's Eze. You think about the right side, it's been Madueke, it's been Saka. You think about in the midfield, sometimes it's Marino that's closest to him. Sometimes it's Nwaneri. Sometimes it's Odegaard. Sometimes it's Zubimendi passing from the base to try and hit him early. Sometimes it's Declan Rice. Sometimes it's Christian Norgard. Like, there's so much change. And even, you know, on the sort of right side fullback positions, you could argue sometimes it's White, sometimes it's Timber. On the left, sometimes it's Lewis Skelly, who does something very, very different to what Calafiori does. There's been so much change, and that makes it harder to adapt. And that's why I'm willing to kind of accept and understand that the adaptation might just take that little bit longer as a result. So, yeah. What else have we got in the live chat? Let's have a look. Bob disagrees with me. He says he disagrees with Noni being a drop-off from Saka. I think we play better with Noni in the team over Saka. I sort of mentioned this on the Unpopular Opinions pod that we did the other day. I obviously think that Noni Madueke has done really well since coming to Arsenal, and I've been impressed. He wasn't a signing that I particularly wanted. And, you know, having seen him play for Arsenal for the first couple of months of the season before obviously picking up that unfortunate injury, I was impressed by what I'd seen. I liked it. Where there is a difference between the two of them, though, is that Saka's outputs are just on another level. Like, I don't think Madueke, and I'll double check this. And again, this is not designed to come across as me having a pop at Madueke. I'm just trying to highlight what I believe the difference is between the two players. Madueke has played 5 games in the Premier League this season, 1 in the Champions League. Okay. And he's got no goals and no assists. Now, that isn't, you know, again, to slag him off or to be solely numbers focused, because as I've said to you guys before, you know, I don't like purely numbers-based analysis. I think numbers should be incorporated in analysis, and numbers should be used to either back up or make you rethink an opinion that you have, rather than it being the basis of your opinion. That's how I've always looked at stat-based analysis. Call me old-fashioned, call me a dinosaur, whatever you want, that's fine. But Saka, who's played 6 games in all competitions for Arsenal this season, in fact 7 if you include the League Cup game, he's got 3 goals. Yeah, so he's got 3 goals in 7 games. Madueke in 6 games has got no goals and no assists. I'm not having a pop at Madueke, but that's the difference in level. Bukayo Saka's outputs are just on another level to that of Noni Madueke's, and I think Madueke will get there, but I don't think he's there today. And as Ayomide points out, they're different styles of play. They are indeed. Zach says, do you think Mikel may play Marino in midfield given his goal-scoring form? Obviously bringing a meltdown. I think he might. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we turn up to Fulham on Saturday with Mikel Marino in the side. You know, Arteta places a lot of value on momentum. And if you've gone on an international break and you've contributed significantly, like Mikel Marino seems to constantly do, then, you know, it does feel like he's riding a bit of a crest of a wave when he comes back. Is it the midfield I would pick? No, it's not. It's not. I wouldn't go that way, but I think that, you know, there's a good chance that Mikel Arteta at least considers that. Hamzat says, would Havertz, Martin and Noni be back for the Spurs match after the international break? I think the hope is to get Odegaard back I don't know about Havertz, and I don't know about Madueke, to be honest. I certainly know that the idea is to get Martin Odegaard back for them. But look, listen, if Ezra's playing brilliantly and scoring goals and contributing and impacting football matches, then there's no rush to bring any of those guys back. You see what I mean? So that's, again, the beauty of having this bigger and more effective and higher quality squad of players that we now have. I think I might take one more before we sign out. Mark says, if we play Merino in the midfield, why not just pair him with Zubimendi, put Eze as a 10 and have Rice on the bench? Well, that is an option in certain games, but I think that Rice is just starting to find his form this season. I think at the start of seasons, Declan Rice is notoriously a little bit slower to get going. We saw that last season. I saw it last season, certainly. But I think, Declan Rice is coming into form and into gear now. So I personally wouldn't leave him out. Merino is one of those players that you can bring on, later on in a game. And I don't think it's really that much of a problem for him. I've seen a post that was put on social media a couple of days ago. Has Kai Havertz put something out? Hold on. No, he hasn't. Not on X anyway. I don't know if he's posted something somewhere else. But there was a picture that came out that said, I don't know if it's real. I don't know what's real on social media anymore. James Nichols says, have you seen the Havertz tweet? Let me know what it is, mate, and I'll definitely look at it. We can have a good look into it and see exactly what's what and what people are saying. But yeah, Laughing Man says that you don't put a 100 million pound England starter on the bench. The 100 million pound thing is significant. I mean, starting for this England team, I don't think that guarantees that you play for Arsenal. But anyway, maybe that's because I'm not an England fan. Maybe I'm just being a little bit of a cynic there. I don't know. But anyway, look, guys, we are going to leave it there. We've got a second episode coming out to you a little bit later on in the day. So keep your eyes peeled for that. The Curious Case of Mikel Merino. Why is Mikel Merino such a good goal scorer? Why is Mikel Merino for Spain a world beater, but for some Arsenal fans, he just doesn't do it? We're going to get into that. We're going to discuss him a little bit later on, and that show will be with you around about 4 p.m. UK time. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners.